Carla Power, who you see here on the left, is the author of Homeland Security, which was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, and If Oceans Were Ink, a finalist for both the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award. She was raised in St. Louis with years in Iran, India, Afghanistan, Egypt, and Italy. Her work has appeared in numerous publications, including Time, the New York Times, Foreign Policy, Vogue, Vanity Fair, and The Guardian. Safinah Elahi is an author. She is also a qualified lawyer and the founder of an independent publishing house based in Pakistan. Her poetry has been critically acclaimed, and one of her novels has been commissioned for TV. Safinah was selected for the Iowa Writers Workshop in 2022 fall residency and is often on judging panels for writing competitions across Pakistan. Welcome to our office.
Welcome you. Can I just move my chair a little bit so I can look at you?
So it's my great pleasure, Safinah, to interview you about the idle stance of the Tippler Pigeon. As I mentioned earlier, one can often do these things just kind of glancing through and picking out main themes, but it is so tightly plotted, and you so want to know what happens to these characters. That I raced through it and read to the last page, which I dare say many interviewers don't with other books. So it's a testament to your storytelling skills, which are really prodigious. I guess I'd start by saying, this really, I mentioned to you that this felt to me like an epic novel that is done through the very direct medium of letters, of an epistolatory approach between mostly these three characters, these three, two girls and one boy, who then both as adults and children. And I just wanted to say, to start off, how did you get the idea to do it as a series of letters, which I think works so beautifully because it's immediate and you want to keep reading, short, but at the same time goes right to the emotional heart of what you're trying to get at?
First of all, Carla, thank you for doing this. I am so grateful, and like I said, had a fan moment there that you're the one interviewing me. I think the format kind of, when I had the story, the format kind of lent itself. I wanted Misha's voice. I wanted to show that this is an 8-year-old talking about her life. And I think that I couldn't show that in any other sort of voice. Initially, it was going to be maybe third-person narrative, where all these three characters are, a narrator is telling the story. But because I wanted Misha's voice to be, to be so strong and almost, I'd say, naive in her, because of her age, it just kind of happened for me. I think these three voices, I wanted the reader to not feel like somebody else is telling the story. I wanted them to connect with the characters, directly. And that's how I think it just happened that, this format just happened.
Well, it's a really, really clever way of just drawing you in immediately. And yeah, I mean, the other thing, when I said epic, what I meant is not necessarily, I mean, it is sort of multi-generational in that you learn about these characters when they're children and then again when they're adults. But what I meant also was that it's a really broad, at least to a non-Pakistani, it feels as though you're saying so much about Pakistani society, and particularly the class divide. And we were talking earlier about how it seems to me that a lot of contemporary fiction is often very siloed. Like you think of books like Fleischman in Trouble, or other really, Rachel Cusk books, or that they're about one particular socioeconomic class, and it's kind of people don't want to tackle the others in their books, and this seems really gutsy because it brings together affluent people and non-affluent people, and it's not just taking them off the street; it's weaving together a story with the rich and the poor. And I mean, that seems to me a real force for good, given how polarized so many of our societies are. And I wondered whether you could talk a bit about how the three stories respond to the socioeconomic divides in contemporary Pakistan.
So I think when I was thinking of this story, I had Misha and I had Nadia, and I wanted to show a friendship between two people who don't belong to the same class. And I know this has been spoken about before. This is not the first time that this has happened. But I also wanted to show in a situation where these two children don't really understand the class divide. So in her, I wouldn't say ignorance, but in her pure form, Misha doesn't know that Nadia is not equal to her. But the adults know that. So it's really the society that kind of controls the judgment and treatment of two individuals who may not be the same. And I did know that I wanted to talk about class structures and how it kind of, the story weaves through the characters, and it became this thing where it became about Nadia, how she gets agency, how she somewhat travels through her class to a place where she's able to make her own decisions and able to understand what position she's in. Because a lot of women in Pakistan don't know what's happening to them. So it's almost like they're told that it's okay to be in that place, and no decisions need to be made to make their place better or to make their position better. But Nadia here finds herself, and even though, traumatic events happen and it's not ideal how she's raised, and she's kind of plucked out of her village in Okara, and she's, put into this family who has all the means in the world, and she thinks of Misha as a princess. She thinks that Misha has everything, and yet Nadia cannot have all of that, because she's not Misha, and she's not what she initially thinks she could be. So there's a scene when the children are going to their grandparents' house, and she's really looking forward to it because Misha really builds it up. And she talks about it, and she says that, my grandfather's house is so great, and Nadia expects that, she's also a child, and she'll swim in the pool, and, she's going to be greeted like Misha and Zohaib have been, talking about the house. And when she goes, she understands that, no, this is not how it is, she's placed somewhere, and there's a certain kind of, boundary that she cannot cross.
And I love the detail of where she goes, she's in a frilly dress, and she's like, I should have worn a shalwar kameez, so at least I would know where I was at that point. And that seemed really...
And, I wanted to get into the child's mind and think that, how do they process information? How do they process their surroundings? What is she thinking if she's in a place where she's like, I got it wrong. But then she rethinks, she goes back to what did she do wrong?
Right.
Like maybe she shouldn't have expected, maybe she shouldn't have worn this, so at least like she'd be friends with the staff at the grandfather's house, so there's these little thoughts that come in, and Misha, being, her flowery self, doesn't even understand or doesn't even notice that something has switched, so
Well, and I think it's the two girls, you know, I want them to be like president and prime minister. Like they're like these fabulous, strong, cheeky, you know, but deeply human. I mean, you make both the you know, the princess and the servant girl are you kind of explode the stereotypes of both, because there's no villain, there's no heroine,
Yeah.
there's no there is a kind of mutual curiosity and life force that you're right,
Yeah.
the adults don't seem to allow for
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
And I love that dynamic in there.
Yeah.
And then you also managed to write from a guy's perspective, which was really
I was so
impressive.
worried about that. And I've never lived in London. So you know, there's an international debate about who can write, you know, what characters.
Right.
And it's mostly to do with obviously ethnicity and race and color. But again, writing another gender, you know, is also difficult because you don't know what thoughts are going on, you know, in his mind, and he's a troubled man and he's in London, and I think I generally get spaces right, but the thoughts have to be right, you know. Nobody has to come out and say that, what have you written, you know, this is not authentic, like why are you stereotyping, you know, this boy. But I found that a bit difficult, but I'm glad that you mentioned it, that it was believable.
Well, I perhaps should have asked you first. Could you read?
Read,
some,
yeah.
So we get the tone.
Of course. So I had I took out a passage which now I seem to have. Just give me a minute. It talked about the title because I think people are generally quite curious about why it's called what it is. So I'll read this passage from Misha's voice, and Misha, I'll tell you a little bit about the story as well. Misha and Zohaib are a pair of siblings, and Nadia works, she doesn't work, her mother works for their family, and Misha and Zohaib have gone for a walk at the Sea View, which is kind of a famous Karachi spot to walk at, and it kind of lends to why I decided to title the book The Idle Stance of the Tippler Pigeon. So this is Misha's perspective, Karachi, Pakistan. Baba says, "Do you see that bird, Misha?" Baba asks, pointing to a string of pigeons lined on the thick electric wires connected to the poles. "Baba, those are pigeons, not birds," I say coyly, as if I know so much more than him. "Well, yes, a pigeon is a kind of a bird. And do you know what kind of pigeons those are?" "I don't know. Grey pigeons?" "Haha, yes, Misha, grey pigeons, that's the perfect type. Such a dodo you are," Bhai says, jeering. "So, grey pigeon can be a type of pigeon. What are you, a bird scientist?" I retort. "Bird scientist? You mean ornithologist?" Bhai keels over, laughing. Hey, bache, don't make me regret bringing you guys here," Baba says sternly, his thick eyebrows raised in mock anger. "They're sort of grey, but they're called Tippler pigeons," Baba resumes. "Oh, okay, I didn't know that. What's so special about them?" "There are lots of things special about them. Firstly, they're very intelligent, just like you," he says to me, smiling. I broaden my chest, just like I see Bhai doing when he feels proud about something he does and is complimented on it. I also manage to steal a glance towards Bhai, who makes a face at me, this time quietly. Second, they have exceptional endurance. What does that mean?" I ask, confused. Baba has this habit of using really big words sometimes. They fly right over my head before I can even pronounce them in my mind. "It means they're tough. They may not look like it, but they are. They can fly for almost an entire day, 20 hours or so. But they look so lazy, just sitting in a line, so idle. Like they have no worries," Bhai says. "Yes, Zohaib, but we can't be so quick to judge, can we? You know, these birds are so tough and intelligent that there are flying competitions they're entered into. People train them, and then they get prizes if their tippler wins. Sort of like a dog race, but for birds. And in the sky, I say smugly. Haha, yes, just like that.
Yeah, I mean, there, and not to give too much away, like, so much of this is like a kaleidoscope of family life. You know,
Yeah.
you think you understand it, and then you get somebody else's perspective, and then you're like, oh, it's shifting and shifting. And this was one of the few times I think the father and the children are together.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's a really lovely, intimate scene. I guess, did you feel that, did you start off by thinking you were going to do a book about families, or a book about class, or a book about women? I mean, what was the spark there?
I think when I began writing, I wanted the central relationship was going to be Nadia and Misha's. So I wanted to show that this is their friendship, but at the same time, I wanted to talk about women. Generally, when she grows up, what happens? This friendship kind of happened, as many friendships do. And does it phase out? How does it affect her? Her being from a certain class and then being introduced to so much suddenly, and her not being prepared for it. And then, again, how do different people deal with trauma? So at the same time, I know it sounds very ambitious to talk about class and then talk about trauma and then talk about harassment, but it almost is a person's life. I feel like this is a complete life, a lens into a certain time in a person's life. And when you talk about one person, it's not only one aspect that one can show, because that would be unfair, that I only show workplace Nadia, that this is what's happening to her and this continues to happen. So I didn't want to make this a story about romance or ambition. At the same time, I wanted to show love. I wanted to show love between Nadia and Misha. I wanted to show love between Nadia and Zohaib. There's just this cryptic, sort of confusing, love that there is, and it doesn't have to be, romantic love or even platonic love. It's just that you've lived together.